Rock music isn't just about the sound, it's about the attitude, the egos, and sometimes the all-out wars between its biggest stars. From Axl Rose challenging Vince Neil to a fight to Anthony Kiedis getting an entire band blacklisted, some of these feuds got so personal they almost ended careers. But which rock stars hated each other the most? And why did their grudges last for decades? Johnny Rotten versus Billy Joe Armstrong. Punk purist versus mainstream success.
And so, you know, I've moved on, but a lot of the foolish haven't, and they're still stuck there. And that explains Green Day.
Rock feuds don't get much more classic than this one. Johnny Rotten, the snarling frontman of the Sex Pistols, has spent decades taking shots at Green Day, calling them nothing more than copycats who rode the coattails of real punk.
You know, there's a band that haven't come up with anything of their own. What they literally are is a coat hanger with a studded leather jacket stuck on it. All right? And I think it's a parody and it's a shame.
He once said, "They're just coat hangers with a studded leather jacket stuck on it," making it clear that he saw them as a watered-down version of what his band started. Rotten, always one to wear his disdain on his sleeve, felt that punk had become commercialized and that bands like Green Day were nothing more than a product of that mainstream shift.
It's having the guts to admit to yourself the things that you don't normally admit to yourself, and that's what like music is and writing songs is.
Billy Joe Armstrong, on the other hand, has always acknowledged that the Sex Pistols were a huge influence on Green Day, but he wasn't about to let Rotten's comments slide. In an interview, he clapped back by pointing out the irony of it all. If it weren't for Green Day, the Sex Pistols wouldn't have even had their big reunion tour in the 90s. It was a savage, yet truthful dig. Green Day brought punk back to the mainstream in a way that few had. And for all Rotten's complaints about them being sellouts, he had no problem cashing in on a nostalgia tour.
You thought rock and roll was dead and you wanted to end it. Is that fair?
No, I wanted to put a full stop on it and start again, yes.
Uh-huh.
Which I did, with
Yeah.
great success.
Even after that, Rotten didn't let it go. Over the years, he kept firing off insults, saying Green Day was just a bunch of silly rich fat kids who had nothing original to offer. But here's the funny part. Billy Joe never really hit back in the same way. He always kept it classy, saying that Nevermind the Bollocks was one of the first punk records he ever heard, and that it had a huge impact on him. It's like a one-sided grudge match, with Rotten still bitter and Billy Joe having long since moved on.
And I heard the beef started when Jack White barred Dan from entering into a studio. And when they asked Jack White about it, he said, anything you heard anyone say about me is 100% accurate. Was this part true? Did you get barred from the studio?
Imagine spending years perfecting your sound, only to see another band come along with a strikingly similar setup and style. That's exactly how Jack White felt about Dan Auerbach and the Black Keys. White, already an icon with the White Stripes, was furious when the Black Keys started rising to fame.
I got in my car and I hopped over there, and Bob called me and told me to turn around. He said that the owner of the studio didn't want me there. And you know, it was super awkward.
He saw them as blatant copycats, stealing his stripped-down, bluesy two-person band aesthetic and making it their own. He even tried to have Auerbach banned from his recording studio, making it clear that this wasn't just a professional rivalry, it was personal.
The frontman tried to explain the context of the situation in an interview with Rolling Stone. He felt forced to express his private opinions due to the released email. Unfortunately, it may have made things worse. He then issued a long statement on his website apologizing.
The bitterness between them escalated when White's divorce papers leaked online. Among them were emails where he ranted about Auerbach, complaining that their kids attended the same school and calling him a pest who kept invading his world. White wanted nothing to do with him, but Auerbach, he never seemed too bothered. Instead of throwing punches back, he handled the whole situation with surprising grace, saying, "He sounds like an asshole, but I feel embarrassed for him."
What happened that night was kind of what I said on Twitter, but I deleted it, and I got to the thing where I told Jack I'd never talk about it.
Okay.
And we'd be
fair
fine.
enough.
But
just when it seemed like things couldn't get more dramatic, the Black Keys drummer, Patrick Carney, claimed that White had tried to fight him in a bar. He tweeted about how White showed up at a place he frequented in New York and confronted him aggressively. White denied it, saying he never got physical, But the damage was already done. For a brief moment, it looked like this rivalry might explode into something way bigger. Eventually, they seemed to patch things up, with Carney later tweeting that he had talked to White and all was good. But then, just to keep things mysterious, he deleted that tweet. So where do they stand now? Who knows? But one thing's for sure, Jack White still isn't the Black Keys' biggest fan. Liam Gallagher versus Noel Gallagher, the most dysfunctional brothers in rock.
How did that come about?
He just decided he wanted to do acoustic songs, which is cool. But now when we get back to England, we're going to spread it out. We're going to do them as a band.
You're still having a good time?
Yeah, I'm rocking, yeah.
No one fights quite like family, and no rock feud is as long-lasting or ridiculous as the one between Liam and Noel Gallagher of Oasis. They weren't just bandmates, they were brothers. But instead of that making them closer, it turned them into rock's most infamous rivals. From the very beginning, their relationship was fueled by constant arguments, both on and off stage. In the early days, their fights were mostly verbal, with both brothers trading insults in interviews. But things got physical too. In 1994, during a performance in LA, Liam changed the lyrics of a song to mock Noel right in front of the crowd. That was just the beginning. In another incident, Liam showed up drunk to a recording session and invited random people from a bar to come party in the studio. Noel, furious, grabbed a cricket bat and reportedly swung it at Liam's head.
Also, but he watches you.
Oh, he's obsessed. He'll be watching this now. Can we just say, can we all say hello to him? Where is he? What camera's on there?
There you
Hi,
go.
Liam.
Over the years, they kept making music together, but the hostility never died down. In 2009, the final straw came when Noel's guitar was smashed backstage before a show. He had enough and officially quit Oasis, saying he couldn't work with Liam for one more day. Since then, the two have continued throwing jabs at each other in interviews and on social media. Liam even threatened to sue Noel for slandering his character. Despite talks of a 2025 reunion, most fans believe it's only a matter of time before they explode again. Paul McCartney versus John Lennon. The Beatles' Cold War.
You must be pleased with what Paul's doing now, John.
I'm pleased that everybody's doing well, you know. Yeah. I'm more pleased that Ringo's doing well, you know, that he's got himself a good niche. Because I knew Paul would be all right. What the hell am I worried about him? You know, I know.
Even the greatest band of all time couldn't escape the curse of creative differences. By the time the Beatles broke up in 1970, the relationship between Paul McCartney and John Lennon had turned into something that looked more like a war than a friendship.
And he took it as an insult.
Those were very paranoid times,
I
you know. And let's face it, we didn't welcome Yoko in the studio.
I know.
Because we thought it was a guy thing.
Lennon felt that McCartney had become too controlling, micromanaging every aspect of the band's music, while McCartney saw Lennon as unpredictable, abrasive, and increasingly disconnected from the group. It didn't help that Lennon was diving deep into his new life with Yoko Ono, bringing her into band meetings and recording sessions, which frustrated the others.
Anyway, she didn't split the Beatles, because how could one girl split the Beatles, or one woman, you know? The Beatles were drifting apart on their own, you know?
Once the Beatles officially called it quits, things got even messier. Instead of keeping their frustrations private, both John and Paul took shots at each other through their solo music. Lennon went straight for the jugular with How Do You Sleep, a song so brutal it didn't leave much room for interpretation. He straight up called McCartney's post-Beatles music Muzak and made it clear that he thought Paul had been nothing without the band. McCartney, on the other hand, responded more subtly with Too Many People, taking a few well-placed jabs at Lennon's self-righteousness and how he seemed to be preaching about peace while still being just as angry and bitter as ever.
And I rang John, and I was baking bread and got quite good at it, you know. So when I heard John was doing it, it was great. We could just talk about something so ordinary. There's no threat.
Despite all the tension, the two eventually found their way back to a friendship. In the years before Lennon's death in 1980, they reconnected, even having casual phone conversations about everyday life. Paul later said that when Lennon was killed, he felt like he had lost a brother. Their rivalry may have been intense, but in the end, it was a complicated relationship built on deep respect and love. Gene Simmons versus Paul Stanley, the toxic partnership that never ended.
get a woman when they're on tour, but this is a lot more important and a lot more heartfelt than the bragging about the other stuff.
Would you cut? Hold on 1 second. Cut this off for a second.
When two rock stars spend over 50 years in the same band, there are bound to be some issues. But Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley of Kiss have taken dysfunction to a whole new level. These two have been at each other's throats for decades, and the craziest part, they never actually broke up. Somehow they've managed to keep Kiss going while constantly throwing shade at each other.
When I first met Gene over at a guitar player's house that I was playing with and he was playing with in another band, I didn't like him. I thought he was full of himself, opinionated, brash, insulting. Gene's first comment to me was, "Oh, I hear you right, play me something."
The root of their issues comes down to their completely different approaches to the band. Simmons has always treated Kiss like a brand, more focused on business deals, merchandise, and making money than on the music itself. Stanley, on the other hand, sees himself as the heart and soul of the band, the one who truly cares about the music and keeping the legacy alive. That difference in mindset led to years of resentment. Simmons was out there doing reality TV shows, selling Kiss-branded coffins and making millions, while Stanley felt like the guy holding the band together musically.
And when Steve, this other guitar player, said, "Why don't we have a band together?" I said, "Well, you can play with him or you can play with me, but you're not going to play with us."
The tension has boiled over in interviews multiple times. Stanley has accused Simmons of taking credit for band decisions that he had nothing to do with, while Simmons has downplayed Stanley's role, making it seem like he's the one who made Kiss what it is today. You'd think all this drama would have led to a breakup years ago, but nope, they stuck it out for the money. No matter how much they dislike each other behind the scenes, they know that Kiss is a cash machine that neither of them wants to walk away from. So while they might not like each other much, they've proven that money can keep even the most toxic partnerships alive. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.